Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are continuing our build of the Capra Builder's Kit. Part 1 will be just up here in the corner. Yeah, I never know which corner to point at. I think it's this one. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. I hope you enjoy it. As I mentioned in my last video, this is not really a tutorial, so if you are looking for answers, this really isn't the video that you should be watching. However, if you are just looking for some entertainment, something to put on in the background, hopefully you're digging it. So we are going to jump right back into it. In our last video, we finished the axles, and now today we are going to be moving on to the suspension. Building shocks is one of my favorite things to do. I would not say that I'm particularly good at it. It's not like I'm some sort of suspension wizard or anything. But I do enjoy kind of the, I don't know, the precision that goes into it, the delicate, I don't know, tuning of shocks and everything. The shocks in the kit come with some, what looks like 35 weight oil. We're just gonna use this. I have no idea if this is adequate or not. But until I start to drive this, I just won't really know. Hold that thought. We got some little parts here. We got some O-rings and seals and stuff. So we're gonna put everything onto this mat. Whoa, so that doesn't happen. Found it. Okay, right. So we're gonna put that off to the side for now, along with this bag. What was I saying? Right. So until I start driving the Capra, you know, I'm not going to be saying, oh, well, I want to use 50 weight oil or whatever, because I just don't know. So we're going to put all of the itty bitty parts in there. Okay. Oh, and we got one more bag here. We got the rod ends. Now, some of you people watching may be very frustrated with me. I am not one who will like line up all the parts, you know, like all the rod ends. Kerning, is that what it's called? Knurling? I can't remember what it's called. You know, where it's like you take all your shock bodies and you line up. I don't do that. I just put it in like one big pile and then rummage through it and then get frustrated when I can't find what I'm looking for. All right, so we're gonna start with the shock bodies, and it looks like 303, so O-rings, it looks like it goes O-ring, spacer, O-ring, and that is the seal in the bottom. Okay, and we're gonna put that back on. I have a little bit of experience with Capra shocks. I am running them on a couple of my trucks, but it's only because, you know, it's what I had laying around. You know, I did some trades, and that's what was included. So far, I don't really think I have anything to complain about as far as like leaking and everything goes. So I'm not really worried about running Capra shocks. Now, I did mention in my last video that we're going to be doing something a little bit different with this Capra. I'm actually stealing the axles to put onto another one of my builds, which is a bit of a secret right now. I needed the extra width that the Capra axles provided. So this Capra will ultimately be getting 10.2 axles. I was watching Scale Builder Guild's video of his Capra from a couple years ago, where he did the same thing, and that's where I first got the idea. And I'm with him on this one. I think the Capra axles are too wide for the cage, and I think the 10.2 axles look right at home. I think they look so good width-wise. So that's what we're going to be doing. So these shocks, oh boy. I will say O-rings, or not O-rings, E-rings. E-clip, what are these things called? Hang on, what's in my pliers? E-clips, there we go, are like the most frustrating thing. And I know some manufacturers have moved away from them, and let me tell you, I really wish Axial would too, because I just... Does anybody like E-rings, honestly? These things... Ah, thank goodness. All right, we got one on. One of, what, 8? Great. You know, E-rings, if you just, like, look at them the wrong way, you just fling off into nowhere, and then you're stuck trying to find one. I don't even know if I have any spares on hand. Ugh, and of course I'm using this little magnetic mat. So, it's stuck, and I can't get it. Oh, boy. Where's this guy? So I'm using this little magnetic mat, this CowRC magnetic mat, which is great. The problem is these E-clips, or C-clips, what are they called? Are like so thin I can't get my pliers underneath them to pick them up. Alright, so there is one. I had intended, when I picked up this kit, I had intended to pick up some of that associated green slime, I think it's called, because if you put a little bit of that in the seal at the bottom of the shock, it's supposed to help keep the oil in. I'm telling you, these things are so annoying. Can we just agree, companies, if anybody from any company is watching, Axial, if anybody from Axial is watching this, can we please move away from these dang clips? Like, let's just move to a little threaded shaft with a lock nut at the top like other companies are doing. Boy, this is no fun. Right. So, if you are watching, I want to thank you very much. I enjoy doing this. I hope you enjoy watching it. Like I said in my last video, my previous video, whenever I'm messing around down here in the basement with RC stuff, I usually have like my phone or something propped up, and I'll have concentration. Some RC video playing in the background, just to provide a little bit of entertainment. And you know, I wanted to contribute as well. Alright, one thing I want to do actually, now that I see it, is there's a little bit of flashing on this, on the shock piston, so we're just going to scrape that off. Let me check these others. One actually looks okay. And this guy also looks okay. Alright, there's a little bit of flashing, which is that like little piece of plastic that like hangs off the edge. Just wanted to scrape that off just to make the shocks as smooth as possible. Right, so going back to my original, what I was talking about, since I'm going to be switching over the 10-2 axles onto this Capra, I will likely not be using these shocks. I'm actually planning on switch to the TRX4 shocks. I have been involved in radio control stuff for a long time, and let me tell you, Traxxas shocks, at least their aluminum ones, are some of the smoothest on the market. I've got on my Rustler here, I've got a set of their GTR shocks, I think they are. They're like really big, wide diameter ones. They are phenomenal shocks. They really are. And back in the day, we used to run the Traxxas big bore shocks, the 4-inch or 3.5-inch. Same thing. Those things are buttery smooth, and I never have issues with them leaking. So I think, the Traxxas TRX4 shocks, it's like you can find a set of takeoff shocks where people buy the kits and then they just divvy out the parts. You can buy a full set of shocks for like $50 on eBay. Brand new Traxxas TRX4 shocks, the GTS, I think they're called. And every report I've read, or everything I've read about them, you know, everybody talks about how just smooth and reliable, and they never leak. And I just think for your money's worth, I don't know if you can do much better. You know, a lot of people like the Desert Lizard shocks. I have never used them personally, but they also look pretty interesting with the internal springs. Anyway, sorry if there's a lot of I'm in my basement. Sorry to ruin the illusion of YouTube. I'm sitting in my basement. You know, my water heater's over there. The air conditioner unit is just outside on this wall here. So I apologize if you can hear all of that going on. I got pipes running up over my head. So I apologize if in the background you can hear all of that. One day, assuming all of this works out, you know, I'd love to have, you know, my own separate studio that's nice and quiet and all that stuff, but we are a long way away from that. So for the time being, the basement is just gonna have to do. And I'm sure many of you watching know exactly what I'm talking about. You just kind of set up shop wherever there's space for you. When I was a teenager, same thing. I set up in my basement for a little bit. Before that, I had my closet in my bedroom was my work area. I had like a little shelf that was built into the closet, and I just would kind of push my clothes to the side and you know, work on my car in the closet until eventually I moved into the basement where I had a little corner set up. All right, there is 3. Next up, we've got one last one, the rod end here. Now these shocks are 97 millimeters, which feels kind of odd. The industry standard is what, 90 millimeters? So it feels kind of odd for axial to go to 97, especially because right out of the box, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, but right out of the box, I think the Capra sits kind of tall. You know, I've seen like West Desert Wheeler, which incredible channel. If you don't watch West Desert Wheeler, highly recommended. He's based out in Utah, which is where I used to live for a little while before moving back here to New England. You know, he does this mod where he removes the spring cup to allow the allows the springs to settle a little bit lower. So I feel like if axial hitch is gone with 90 millimeter shocks right from the factory, it just would have been a lot better, but I don't know. They must have done it for some reason. But these shocks overall do seem pretty nice. Like I said, I have prior experience with them, but I like the hard anodized shock bodies. Big fan of metal shock bodies. It is threaded, which again, huge fan of threaded. I have dealt with so many shocks where you have to use those stupid preload clip spacer things. Hate those. Big fan of threaded shock bodies. And they have a bleeder cap, which again, I'm not, for me, is not a necessity in a shock, but it certainly does make building the shocks a lot easier. All right, now we just got to get that O-ring into the top of the shock cap. Let's see, what can I use? I don't want to damage that O-ring. That does go in the top, right? Yes, it does. Which is interesting because it almost feels like it's too big to fit into that. But, right, so we are at the point now. Actually, let's press. We got these ball spacer things on there. Oh, come on, let's go. There we go. So we're gonna go ahead. That you know, we got the ball that goes into the rod end, or the shock cap with that little spacer built in. So we are just gonna go ahead and put that in all of them. And I don't think it matters what side it goes on, but I think we'll do, sure, whatever, I don't know. Again, this is not a tutorial, this is just me fumbling my way through life. Trying not to mess anything up too badly. Alright. Come on, there we go. Okay. So those are all in. Next up, I don't have a little stand to like place the shocks. I really wish I did. So what we're gonna do is I have the tire here. We are going to leave that up in the corner, and then we can just kind of lean the shocks up against it. All right, so now for the filling, and it looks like we're gonna have to chop the end off of that. All right, so if you've never filled a shock before, it's really not that tough. So what we're gonna do is I like to compress the shocks just a little bit and then fill them up almost till they're full. Leave maybe, I don't know, what's that? Maybe 5 millimeters or so, 1/8 of an inch. And then I like to cycle the shock just a bit. Don't just like yank that shock shaft down, because what it's going to do is it's going to compress the oil and shoot it straight up. And I have done that a fair number of times. So we're going to cycle that just a little bit, get that oil moving around. Fill it up a little bit more, and now I know there's plenty of air bubbles in there, so we're going to keep cycling just to make sure that we've gotten any big air bubbles out. Alright, and then we are going to leave that standing to allow any remaining air bubbles to float to the surface. You're definitely, when you do this, you're definitely going to want to have some paper towels on hand, because this gets messy. Alright, this one, seeing some air bubbles coming up. So we will again leave that off to the side. Alright. And like I said, building shocks, I don't know what it is about it. It's like one of my favorite things to do, and I don't know if it's because I feel like there's a little bit of like skill involved. Not that you have to be a master by any means to do this, but I feel like assembling the kit is really pretty easy for the most part. I mean, it helps to have some prior experience and kind of know what you're doing. But for the most part, it's just following instructions. You know, this screw goes there, that part goes there, until you're done. But shocks really feel like they take I don't know, something about it. So I used to race. If you didn't watch my previous video, I used to race a lot. And what I love about the racing scene is the level of tuning that goes into it. You know, every little thing, toe in, camber, ride height, you know, shock oil, shock springs, weight distribution. And I know in the RC community, there's a lot of that as well, but it's not nearly, at least not that I've seen, not nearly as extensive as it is in the racing community. You know, there's all these different gauges and tools and stuff you can use to make sure that everything is exactly where you need it to be. And I think for crawling, or you know, this stuff that we do now, that I do, I'm starting to get a little bit of that back with shocks. I think maybe that's why I like it so much. Okay, so now that all 4 are filled, we're going to go back to the first shock. I'm going to cycle it just a few times. I don't see any air bubbles coming up. I'm going to add just a little bit more because we're going to overfill and then bleed the shock. Oh, I see some like tiny itty bitty bubbles in there. Okay. So now what we need to do is we are going to add on the shock cap. I'm going to try this again with the O-ring. Try to get it in there. And I don't know if the best method is to... I don't want to pinch that O-ring because that's how you get leaks. But it really does feel like it's just a little bit too big, but maybe once you screw it down, it kind of... that's a good thing. Okay, so with the O-ring in there, we're going to screw on the cap and we're gonna tighten it down all the way. Paper towel. We're actually gonna thread that down a little bit. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna wrap that shock up and then compress it all the way. And I don't know how well you can see it, but a little bit of oil is going to come out, or maybe a lot, depending on how much you filled it. So we're going to keep that compressed. And then we take this little, what is this, a 2.5 by 3 millimeter screw. Let's see. This is going to be kind of tough. Try to... Ooh boy, is this a 1.5 millimeter? Yeah, so I broke my 1.5 millimeter driver, and so now I just use this this MIP bit by hand. Far from perfect, but we actually are going to be very delicate, just because I don't have a lot of okay, and again, tighten down most of the way and then finish off by hand. And there we have, if all went well, clean off the last little bit of oil here. Yeah, we have a nice smooth shock. I don't hear... If you got air bubbles in there, you can hear like squeaking and stuff going on. I don't hear any of that. But interestingly, what it doesn't say is, so you got red springs and, oh boy. Okay, so we've got, they give you, I didn't realize this, you actually get a full set of 2 spring rates. So I'm guessing it's like firm and soft. Of course, they're all stuck together, so it feels like... So green must be soft, red must be firm. We are going to go with soft, I think. The Capra is such a light vehicle. Ooh, that's a good shock. The Capra is such a light vehicle, I don't think it makes sense to put on firm suspension, firm springs. Okay, so there we have a complete shock. All right, that's very exciting for you, for all you at home. That's exciting, I guess, right? I don't know. All right, but it's the same, you know. It's the same for all 4. One of the things I did when I put the 10.2 kit together, come on. When I put the 10.2 kit together, I decided that I wanted to do very little cutting. And we are going to do the same with this. We're going to do very little cutting. We're just going to leave it all in there, I guess. So same thing, I'm going to add just a little bit more oil. We're gonna cycle it just a few more times. Ooh, that's a full shock. We got the O-ring in the cap, so we're gonna go ahead and put that on. All right. I'm gonna wrap it up again in the paper towel because this part gets messy. And we're going to push the shock shaft all the way up. Keep it compressed. And then go ahead and add the screw. So the reason I'm keeping it compressed is because I feel like, or my assumption is rather, if I were to extend the shock shaft, it would just suck more air in since that's before I get that screw in. So I want to, yeah, that's another one. I tell you, bleeder caps really make it easy. Yeah, so my thinking is I compress the shock, squeeze the oil out of that bleeder cap, and then keeping it compressed keeps any air from getting sucked into the shock. Right? Oh, wait, no. Yeah, what am I doing? Got distracted there for a minute. Because if you were to, if you were to compress the shock, bleed the oil out, and then pull it out a little bit, it would then suck air in. You add that screw, now you got air in your shock, which you don't really want. But there is a second one. That's nice. Okay, we'll check this one for air bubbles. Not seeing any, so we'll add just another couple of drops. Because again, I want to make sure that as I'm bleeding these shocks, I want oil to come out. Because I don't want to like have to take the shock cap off, add a little more oil in, then bleed it all. So, okay, O-ring is in there. I still don't love how that O-ring sits in that cap. So the Traxxas shocks, I don't believe use a bleeder cap. They use like a bladder that sits on top of the oil. It is more challenging to bleed and make sure you have the right amount and everything in there. But something about them, they know their shocks, because once you build your shock and you get it, all the oil and everything, you get them bled, they do not leak, at least in my experience. All right, my camera will only record for 30 minutes at a time, and it's easy. I'm not looking up. I'm not looking up as often as I should, and so every now and then I look up and it's like, oh, camera's, the reached the limit. Recording is stopped, and so I'm like, I don't know where I left off. Great. Oh well, who cares? It's just less time you have to listen to me ramble, I guess. Which is honestly a win for everybody, am I right? All right, we're on the final shock cap, and I believe we are going to call it a night once this shock is complete. Once again, it is 9:30 at night when I'm building this, and I have had another long day. All right, I'll get that on nice and tight. So I don't know how, like Harley and Scale Builders Guild will go on live, and they'll be on live for hours, and I'm like, I just don't know how you guys have the energy for that. After like 45 minutes, I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm tired. I need a nap and a snack. All right, we got the final shock bled. We'll tighten down on the screw. Get it cleaned up. All right. And then we got to find the final red spring. And put this back in the chuck. that was... I don't have great experience with axial shocks, if I'm being perfectly honest. The 10.2 Builder's Kit shocks are atrocious. The SMT-10, which is this guy right here, those shocks were awful. I was not at all impressed with them. I am not impressed with them. However, the Capra shocks, I'm okay with. I think they did a pretty good job on those shocks. Obviously, time will tell in terms of, you know, how much they leak and how well they hold oil, spring rates, all that stuff. I think, like I said, they're a little bit long for the kit. I think Axial should have gone with 90 millimeter shocks. I don't understand the decision to go with 97. I think the ride height's a little bit too tall, but that is beside the point. That is, hold them up for the world to see, 4 shocks. They're all identical. We went with the 4 soft spring rates. That does leave us with 4 more of the stiffer springs, which, again, I'll have to play around with. I may end up using them because these shocks are not going on the Capra. They are going on my super secret build. The stiffer springs may end up being better. I don't know yet, but fortunately it's easy enough to trade those out. Okay, but with that, we now have 4 shocks and 2 axles, and a whole lot left to do. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please subscribe, leave a comment, or don't. You know, you do you. It's all good. So we'll be back again before too long, and I believe the next bag we're working on is the links, and then attaching the links and the shocks and everything to the axles. And I am excited for that. And then maybe the transmission, and I don't know what's next. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video, hopefully. If not, thanks for stopping by. See you later.